Sony's founders, how two men made Japan known for quality. Sony. Most of you might know it today for the PlayStation or the cameras, but it is one of the most important companies of the 20th century. Before Sony, Japan was mostly known for cheap and low-quality electronics that didn't last. Think of China today. But one company somehow managed to flip that reputation completely and made Japan known for quality. It pioneered the portable radio, the compact disc, and much more. But the company started in the most humble way possible. The early history of Sony and its two founders is so fascinating, yet not many people know about it. The founders met each other after World War II and later suffered many failures, before finally getting something right. Their first product was a rice cooker that was so bad it overcooked one part whilst the other part was completely raw. So how did it get from that to one of the most successful companies ever? This is the story of Sony and its two founders. Our story starts in September 1945 after World War II had just ended. Japan, after suffering a crushing defeat, was left in ruins. Masaru Ibuka, one of the founders, worked at a research lab for the Japanese Navy during World War II, but found himself out of a job after the war. During the war, radios were very restricted to prevent people from listening to the enemy's propaganda. The Japanese government had even modified everyone's radios to not tune into foreign channels. However, after the war, radio adoption was rising rapidly. Interest in hearing global news was also rising. Ibuka saw an opportunity here. He had a degree in electronics engineering and knew his way around radios. So he decided to open a radio repair workshop. His speciality was modifying the radios so that they could tune into any frequency. He rented a very unpleasant building in Tokyo that had been bombed during the war and didn't even have windows, but it was an instant hit. It was so popular that the store was featured in a local magazine. This article made the store even more popular and piqued the interest of a man named Akio Morita, our second founder. Ibuka had met Morita previously during the war, as both were working as researchers for the Japanese Navy. Ibuka also wanted to do something more than repair radios. So in 1946, Morita's father invested some money, and in total they had 190,000 yen, or just $500, to create a new company. Tokyo Telecommunications Research Institute. Ibuka also asked other engineers he had known during the war to join the company, and 8 engineers did. Now they had both some capital and engineers to figure out what to do. The company had a rough start, to say the least. First, there was no specific goal or direction the company was heading towards, and the capital was too low to invest in any big technology, so they just experimented with everything. Their first product was a rice cooker, which was very primitive and unreliable. The rice would also come out overcooked sometimes and undercooked other times. It was obviously a flop. Their next product was an electrically heated cushion, which was also terrible. It didn't have the right temperature and often burned blankets. This, combined with the rough economy of Japan, meant that the company wasn't doing too great. In the first year, they made $300. But the company had one thing going for it. It was filled with brilliant engineers who worked for the Japanese Navy during the war. By 1948, the company was struggling and needed to do something big. It was turning small profits to reinvest back into the business, but nothing huge. They also got some additional support from Morita's father, who was a successful businessman. And then it finally happened. They made something good. A magnetic recorder. Ibuka saw a demonstration of a magnetic recording device whilst he was visiting the US and immediately realized its potential for the Japanese education system. He thought that the ability to record and replay material could be a valuable tool for teachers and students alike. When he returned from the US and started researching and found an article complaining about the low quality of tape recorders in Japan, it was written by a fine art student named Norio Oika, who would later become the president and chairman of Sony. Impressed by his knowledge, Ibuka hired him to consult for the company. Oga wrote a damning report about the poor quality of the existing recorders and players, and Ibuka realized how big of a market this was. But they immediately realized how hard it was going to be. Magnetic recorders were very new and rare, even in the US. The only information that they had was that it involved a plastic tape coated with a magnetic material. Amazingly, after borrowing a frying pan from the kitchen roasting some powdered chemicals, this small team managed to create a ferric oxide powder that was fine enough to create discernible audio. Morita was a perfectionist and didn't want to create anything that was not top quality. His philosophy was simple: to make the company known for quality. So after 2 years of perfecting it, they released it in 1950. 2 magnetic recorders named the G-Type and the A-Type. The G-Type was made for industrial use and had a recording time of 1 hour, while the A-Type was designed for home use and had a recording time of 30 minutes. Japan had never seen such great quality recorders. It was an instant hit. Although expensive and heavy, people used it at their homes and schools started using it too. Exactly how Ibuka envisioned. The company was finally on the radar, but it was just getting started. The US had emerged as a superpower after World War II, and it was experiencing one of the biggest economic booms in history. The founders understood this and wanted to enter the US market somehow. Enter transistors. Transistors are arguably the most important innovation of the 20th century. It's what made computers and all electronics accessible to the average person, and it had been invented in 1948. So during the early 50s, transistors were still primitive and needed a lot of improvements. At that time, the power output was so low, it could only be used for things like hearing aids. A perfect challenge for a company filled with brilliant engineers. Western Electronics, the company that owned the patent for the transistors, was about to release it to interested companies. The founders knew they could improve it and make something out of it, but the patent fee was too much. $25,000. Sure, the company had grown, but spending $25,000 meant gambling the entire company on this single idea which hadn't yet been successful. But Ibuka decided it was worth it, and so began the grueling effort to make the transistors better. After a year of experimenting, they finally figured out a way to make it much more efficient and powerful. And what did the company build from these transistors? Portable radios. Now, back in the 50s, radios were bulky devices, yet very popular. If people could carry it around in their pockets, the demand was going to skyrocket. And it was not just for Japan, it would be a success all over the globe. This was the perfect opportunity to show the world that Japan could produce superior products, and Morita was not going to miss it. In 1955, they made a radio much smaller than the average, called the TR-55. For perspective, an average radio was almost 15 pounds before this. The TR-55, 1.2 pounds. It was a hit in Japan, but Morita wanted something even better for the US. That seemed like an impossible task, but Morita had made up his mind, so the work began on a smaller radio that could fit in a pocket. And in 1957, they finally launched the TR-63, a radio so small it could finally fit in a pocket. Now this was a game changer. The product was a massive hit both in the US and around the world. Over the next few decades, the company expanded rapidly, and Morita was a marketing genius. He did interviews and speeches, wrote books, and somehow convinced people Sony was the company for quality products. In doing so, he inspired Japanese companies to do the same and made Japan known for its quality. Ibuka was always the innovator who did engineering best, while Morita was the marketing genius and a perfectionist who didn't shy away from seemingly impossible challenges. So this is how Sony started. One of the most innovative companies in the world was started by brilliant engineers who were perfectly complemented by a marketing genius. So what do you think of Sony and its founders? Do you find them inspiring? Going against all odds and coming up on top is certainly the type of story I love. And if you love the story, don't forget to check out our other videos and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.